Hello. Well, I began my career actually as a youth journalist when I was 13, and it taught me how to ask a lot of good questions, which frankly sometimes gets me into trouble, but I try to use that force for good. And about 6 years ago, I found myself asking a lot of questions about technology, like what is it for, and who gets to design it, and who benefits from it. And we founded Digital Democracy because we were asking those questions as well as some others, like what are the possibilities of new technology to transform situations for some of the world's most marginalized groups? And how can the smallest amount of pressure applied with the right tools create great change, like in Burma, Myanmar, 2007, when monks and lay people, including friends of mine, used less than 1% mobile phone and internet access to organize the largest protests in a generation. Or in Chiapas, Mexico, where last year we were working with Mayan villagers under threat of eviction from the Mexican authorities who've been using satellite phones and flip cameras that we trained them on to prevent the eviction from happening. So I'm going to tell two stories today. And the first begins in Port-au-Prince, Haiti, the first time I met the women's organization COFAVIV. It's founded by survivors of sexual assault, gender-based violence, rape. And they were organizing an emergency meeting. They had to meet under a tarp because their clinic had been destroyed in the earthquake. And they were talking about the horrible, alarming increase of rape and sexual assault in the displaced persons camps. And they were really struggling with what to do about it. We trained them on photography and media, and they took pictures like this one of one of their co-founders, Malia, who'd actually been forced into a safe house because of the death threats she was receiving for the work she was doing to end violence. Well, over time, they were able to share their story on a blog. We created a digital database that documented, that allowed them to document the incidents that they were uncovering, and so that they could never lose it again in a disaster. And we helped them launch 572, which is the first rape response hotline in Haiti, and it's allowed them to increase their access to survivors, give women access to legal, medical, and psychosocial support, increase their network by more than tenfold. And Malia, that same woman who was hiding behind the door, was named a CNN hero last year, and she's influencing policy on the local, national, and international level. Well, we fully transitioned our Haiti program to our partners because to us, the change that matters most is what happens after we're gone. And it raised the question of what next? What other things do we want to do? And we're really asking these questions because we want to know how can we create, again, the greatest impact with the smallest amount of force. So one of the things we're looking at is the fact that most tools are not created with the insights or needs of our end users in mind. So what happens when marginalized communities are really involved in the process of creating these tools? So we've been doing lots of projects actually throughout Latin America, and specifically in Peru, we're working in northern Peru with indigenous communities who have suffered from 4 decades of oil drilling in along the river basins where they live. And if you walk the pipelines, like they do actually all the time to be looking for spills, you'll find hundreds of small spills and many larger spills. This was a site of a major spill more than 10 years ago, and the oil company has claimed that the site has been completely remediated. It's clean, it's fine to drink out of. But if you stir for just a few seconds, like I was able to earlier this year, you see an oily film rise to the top. And there's crud at the bottom. And this is water that they are supposed to be able to drink out of and fish out of. So they're very dedicated, and they're going around with GPS and cameras, and they're documenting these spills, and they're creating lists of it, and they're sending it to the government. And it's worked. This spring, the government declared these areas, after 4 decades, they declared these areas a state of environmental emergency. But the problem is that these groups are still dependent on outsiders to come in and take all the data they're collecting, all of the photos, put them together into maps that actually make sense for the government to do something about it. So we're working to help them build tools that they can actually manage the information themselves. And in Peru, Guyana, Mexico, we're working on what can we do with cheap, easy-to-replace devices like $35 Raspberry Pis, which are little computers, or remote sensing devices, or incorporating satellite imagery, or offline mapping capabilities. So the question that we've asked that drives our work, I pose back to you. What kind of world do you want to live in? Who gets to decide these questions? And what role will you play? Thank you.